It's so nice to talk to you. I'm such a fan, and you're just such an incredible writer and thinker and woman. And I'm just so glad that you agreed to do this today and to let me film it for some of our followers, just as I thought it would just be such an opportune time to talk to you and ask you questions about tactically how we're all supposed to deal with this, and philosophically how we're all supposed to deal with this, and everything. So thank you. Let me start.
It's a dream for me. It's a dream for me. Thank you.
So first of all, well, let me start by asking how are you? How are you doing in this bizarre, surreal movie of a life we're all living?
I feel like I would have a different answer for you every hour.
Yeah.
You know, I wake up hopeful and happy, and I think that might just be the coffee, actually, because usually around noon the hope fades. You know, and we call it in our family quarantine. Like everybody gets a little chippy, you know. But I also am a raging introvert and a major homebody.
Right.
So there's part of this that I'm kind of used to.
Yeah.
You know? And also, I am a person who has lived with chronic anxiety my entire life. That's what if we all had a date, man, if we had a date that we could and say we can get through anything, but the ambiguity of this is what's so scary.
So what do you think, like, how can we use this? I don't know. My feeling is all of a sudden the realest parts of life are sort of slapping me in the face. If I can put it that crudely.
That's it.
What is that? What is it? What's happening?
Here's what I think. Like, first of all, there's all the actual pain and loss and fear that's going out in the world, right? But then I think this whole time reminds me of what early sobriety was like for me. So I feel like we are all like those snow globes, and we just keep ourselves shaken up all the time, you know, with all the distractions and all. I used to have this little snow globe when I was little, and I thought that it was so terrifying because there was this red, scary dragon in the middle. But I liked to play with it, so I would keep it shaken up and then just like let the snow settle, and I'd see the dragon again. And I think that's what's happening right now. Right. We are so used to keeping ourselves shaken up with distractions and busyness and, you know, outer drama, and now it's just like a great settling.
No. Yeah.
And we're just left with what's always been true, right? Which is that we're just incredibly vulnerable, and we have control over nothing. And at the end of the day, all that matters is the people we love, right? But it does remind me of early sobriety. One of the hardest things about letting the snow settle, which to me is what sobriety is, just like dealing with life on its own terms without all the distractions we use to numb ourselves, is that feelings are coming up that people never had to deal with before, right? It's like all the difficulty of being human, we're just left with it right now. We're stuck in our homes. We've got nothing to distract ourselves from it. And the good news is I think that's really, really good stuff. It sucks. Like, it's super painful and uncomfortable, and we're all miserable. But I think, like, I can't imagine what we're here to do other than keep becoming more true and beautiful versions of ourselves, right? And I think that everything we need to become the version of ourselves we're supposed to be next is inside the pain of now, right? So we will become during this time. Like, we're in a kind of a collective grief, and grief is a cocoon. But I think that's why so many people are so tired and they don't know why, right? We're like, grief takes all of you. And dealing with feelings, I mean, Gwyneth, I remember when I was in early sobriety at my 5th AA meeting, I finally got brave enough to talk.
I love this story.
Oh,
Is this your feeling story?
Yeah.
Oh, I cried when I that part of the book. Okay, tell the story. I just interrupted you. Sorry.
No, I got brave enough to speak because I was looking around and thinking, oh my God, these are the first honest people I've ever met in my life, right? And so I stood up and I just said, I'm Glennon and I've been sober for 5 days and I feel awful and I hate everything. And I feel like there's some kind of secret of life that everyone knows except for me. And that's why everything's harder for me than it is for everyone else. And I'm scared that I'm never going to stop feeling this way. And that's all. And then I sat down. And this woman came up to me afterwards and she sat down next to me. And she said, okay, honey, I just want to tell you something that someone told me in early recovery. And she said, the secret of life is that it's not hard for you right now because you're doing it wrong. It's hard for you right now because you're finally doing life right. Right? Doing life right, meaning allowing yourself to feel all the feelings, is terribly hard. That's why so few people do it, right? But the thing is that all feelings are for feeling. And the only thing that's worse than feeling it all is missing it all. And I was like, oh my God, like it sounds so simple, but I did not know before that meeting that all feelings were for feeling, right? I thought that happiness was for feeling and pain and grief and envy and doubt and anger were for numbing, and like they were failures.
Yeah.
Like pain's.
Well, as you say, it's not in the memo that we get, especially as, women, we don't, or men, frankly, we don't get the memo that feelings are for feeling. Feelings are for sublimating, for denying, for pushing down, unless you're going to have a cheerful disposition, and so we don't know how to metabolize and process through the ugly feelings, because then all of a sudden we go to shame, even if we feel the feelings, like I shouldn't be like this, I shouldn't feel like this.
Yeah, we try to control them somehow. And so I think that what's happening right now is that people are starting to feel all their feelings, right? Because we're stuck with ourselves. And Gwyneth, think we're stuck with our people. Yeah. So all of the issues in our relationships that we're there. I mean, I'm so madly in love with my wife. Okay, we are still in the honeymoon period. We've only been married for 3 years. Yesterday, she looked at me and said, what? And I said, listen, I am just going to need you to listen harder. Who says that? I don't know. Who says, I'm just going to need you to listen harder? So our nastiness is coming up, and we're having to practice extreme self-forgiveness. Yeah. Grace and grace and grace and grace and grace. But I just really think that people who, you said the word metabolize, that's what it is. It's like we're metabolizing hard feelings, and I think there's a reward to it. Later in sobriety, I decided to feel my feelings, and it sucked and it was horrible, okay, at first. And I was teaching at the time, and I would make my class walk by my friend Josie's room every single lunch period because there was a sign, this huge sign above her window that said, we can do hard things. And I needed to see that sign every single day. And it was something about that sentence that made me think, okay, life is hard. It's not hard because we made a big mistake or because we're failing. It's just hard, especially for people who are doing it right, who are showing up vulnerably and getting knocked down and trying again and living open-heartedly. And then the we thing was so important to me. Whenever anyone quotes that back to me and says, I can do hard things, I'm like, no, I didn't sign off to that one. It has to be the we, because sometimes being human and being stuck in our own skin can feel so freaking lonely and terrifying. And the only way that it becomes less lonely is to think about everybody else doing it too at the exact same time, right? It's such a individual and completely connected collective experience. So I just think right now we have the opportunity to feel it all and let that change us. It'll tenderize us, right? The harder things get, the softer we get. And I think we can come out of this more tender and more connected.
And in a way, there's never been a more connected we. Like all over the world, we are, and most of the world at this point, we are all experiencing some version of this, some version of, alone togetherness.
Mm-hmm. And it's like this moment of all the fake stuff is gone. Like I am having calls with people. I mean, everyone's doing like the Zoom thing or whatever it is online. I'd never seen their human side before. And now I'm talking to them. They have children dripping all over their head, and I'm seeing their homes, and they're like completely vulnerable. And it's just like, wow, like we're seeing each other human to human. It reminds me of like one giant AA meeting right now. It's like the jig is up. The jig is up, right? We're all just at our most raw and vulnerable. And it feels so weird, but I think we're going to be able to take some of that realness with us into the after.
So how should we be tactical and proactive about mining these things that come up, these hard feelings, these interactions that don't feel good, that we feel like we need to apologize for after, whatever? Like, what are they telling us about ourselves that we can work on in this isolation so that we can take it forward?
Well, I mean, I really believe that every negative emotion we have has a meaning, right? That's why it's such a shame that we have been taught to deny and numb and do all those things with them, because they're all instructive. Like what pisses us off is an arrow pointing us towards what we are supposed to change in the world, right? Like that's, as women, we're taught that when we feel angry, we should feel ashamed of that, right? That when we're angry, it means there's something wrong with us, when actually it just means there's something wrong out there that we can change. So anger is instructive. Envy is my favorite emotion, because every time I feel envious of someone, if I cannot hot potato it, which is what we call like, in our home, we call it bulletproof vests. Like the second you feel tenderness, you put on a certain bulletproof vest. Like I have one kid who's, it's humor. Like every time she feels vulnerable or any negative emotion, she just plays it off with humor, right? I have one that's a blamer. So we see all of that.
Right.
Envy just points us towards what we were meant to do, right? So I think it's so cool to practice not hot potatoing feelings. I've had a decade of 18 years of practice with this, with sobriety, and now I know what to do with them.
So what do we do? What does that mean, don't hot potato?
Well, I think it just means sit with it, metabolize it.
So something happens in the house, you're triggered, and you do what?
Well, I mean, with my people right now, I'm just snapping a lot. Right? I mean, I'm being very human. Like it is a distinct family value of ours that we are trying to raise. I think what our job is, as far as I can understand it, is we're trying to raise small humans that will become older, larger humans, and we're trying to teach them how to deal with being human gracefully, right? Yeah. And the only way I know how to deal with being human with any grace or dignity is to keep showing up for each other, keep screwing up, right? Retreat, apologize, try again. So the amount of apologizing that's going on in this house right now after episodes of quarantine is much, right? It's very much. I actually walked upstairs to Chase's room yesterday after a little chippy episode we had. And before I got to his door, he goes, "It's fine, Mom. It's fine."
Preemptive apology.
Yeah, we have to forgive ourselves completely, right? And I just think that right now is a really excellent time to just lower our freaking standards, lower our expectations, resist all of the hustle talk right now. Like, this is an excellent time to, learn jiu-jitsu and like learn Japanese and Marie Kondo your house. And like, I can't. Like, if we cannot relax during a global pandemic, we will never do it. And I actually think that some of those hustle messages are just more snow. Yeah. Like they're more distraction, so we don't have to like surrender to the inner transformational work that this time could do on us if we let ourselves feel it all.
Mm-hmm. So your practice is to feel it when it happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Metabolize.
Yeah. And use it as information, you know, and rarely in the moment do I know where it's going. I mean, Abby would tell you that when I get very brokenhearted or sad, it often leads me to bed. The last huge effort that my nonprofit did to help reunite families at the border came after I felt so enraged and so depressed and so heartbroken about some stories online that I read that I went to bed for 11 hours. And my favorite story about that is that Tish told me later that when she said, what's wrong with mommy to Abby, Abby said, just let her sleep. When she wakes up, something amazing will happen. And it did. Like, we started the whole campaign. But I do think that there are things in life. We are taught to skip over things, to numb it, to don't let things break your heart. Don't feel it. It's fine. Keep going. There are things that are devastating and enraging enough that it's okay to let it take us out of the game for a little while. And maybe that's part of the metabolizing, because I think a lot of those feelings become fuel that we use later to get our work done.
But when we're stuck in the house,
yeah,
like I've been finding too that some of that stuff, then it makes me feel even more frustrated because I can't take anything out into the world. And this week has been my hardest week, I have to say. Like this week, I don't know why, but this week I feel, I don't know what it is. It's sort of like once you're done with this kind of romanticism of the unknown, like, oh, this is weird and how bizarre that we're closing things and we're in together, and like it's almost like a form of shock, or you know, like romancing something that's unknown. Like that was sort of my first thing, and then now that's worn off. And I'm like, this is crazy. We're all across the world can find in these spaces, and so, and maybe it's just my version of hustling, but I'm like, how can we not waste this crisis? You know, how can we come out of it? How can we take out what has served us and been the wonderful aspects of this? And how can we, you know, there have been some good changes in the world, you know, despite, like, you don't want the people who are suffering from this, you don't want their lives to be in vain, and the people, their families, you know, it's like, we want to use this. And if we can use it to heal culturally in some way or environmentally in some way, like I feel like we should do it. But then I just feel so inert, and I'm like, well, I'm stuck in my house. I can't do anything, you know, I can't.
I feel depressed too. I mean, I feel all of this each day. But I'm listening to you talk, and I'm wondering if first of all, my struggle with mental health my whole life, but also my life as an artist makes this time easier for me, because I really believe that my next thing that I make, like my next book, I always say, I'm never going to write another book until I become a new woman, right? No new books till I'm a new woman, right? No new art. I have to, for every big next thing, whether it's a big activism project, whether it's a book, I have to do the inner work of becoming a new person to make that real in any way. And I'm telling you that my newness, the way I've always become a new person that can birth a new thing, comes after a long period of pain. Like, I've always felt that I don't worship pain anymore, but I can't deny the truth that times for me where I feel stuck or low, or I always know that there's something happening. Like, there's something happening with the compassion that we are feeling for each other, the heartbreak that we are feeling, the crisis where everything's stripped away except for what really matters. There's work that's going on inside of us right now. I believe it. I think of when my sister went through this really stunningly surprise divorce several years ago. She was in so much pain. And I think sometimes it's harder to watch your person go through grief than it is to be the one in grief. It's just so out of control for you. And she moved into my house, and she was walking. Every night she'd come home and she'd try to have dinner with us, and then she'd walk down the stairs and go into our little guest bedroom in the basement. Okay, so one night after dinner, I brought down a cup of tea to her in the room, and I was about to knock on the door, and I just heard her weeping, just by herself, weeping silently in the bedroom. And something about it, I just understood that like she was going through something in there that I couldn't go to. That like there's a part of grief that is just a lonely basement room, and your sister can't even go there, right? So every night she'd go down, and I would just bring my tea and sit outside her bedroom door and just sit vigil. I don't know what the hell I was doing. I just felt like I have to just sit here and protect her from whatever. Months and months later, she walked up the stairs to my house, quit her job, moved to Rwanda to become to use her law degree to prosecute child sex offenders. She stayed there for a year and then came home and married a man with whom she is building a beautiful and true family. But I used to walk by her door after she left and she was in Africa, and I used to think, oh my God, that little room, it was like a cocoon. That pain, those tears, those feelings, she did grief. Like she did it. She didn't distract herself from it. She didn't do a million things to keep herself busy so she didn't have to feel it. She did the grief, right? And it changed her. I think that grief is a cocoon, and I think that this time is a cocoon. And I can't tell you how each day to use it or to make it make sense now, because grief and pain never make sense in the moment, right? But I have learned to trust pain. Right? To trust it, to change me. I have learned to trust dark times. I have learned to trust rock bottoms. Everything beautiful in my life has happened after an individual rock bottom, a marital rock bottom, a world rock bottom, right? My ass is always on the bathroom floor in one way or another. And then eventually, when I get up, something amazing happens. So I can't tell you how to get through this day to day. I'm just apologizing a lot. But I have this deep knowing that if we stay with it, if we surrender to it, we're going to come out new. I just know it.
Yeah. And also, I think there's an opportunity, a unique opportunity, to plumb the depths a little bit and figure out the ways, I don't know, that maybe we aren't fully being ourselves, or things where we're sublimating things. I think a lot of that stuff is coming up and out too for people as well.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend about that yesterday. I think we're less able to ignore our discontent right now in different parts of our life, right? We as women are really good at, we're told just everything's good enough. Just be grateful, be grateful, be grateful, right? So we ignore that longing for more that we have inside of us. And so actually I was just talking to a good friend about this yesterday, who said that she has gotten to the point just during this quarantine where she has stopped saying to herself, I can't do that, or I can't do this. And she's doing the exercise where she writes down like, okay, I'll imagine my truest, most beautiful life. Like, what would my truest, most beautiful life look like? Which is such a scary thing to do, because once you admit that you can imagine it, then you might have to do something about it, right? Or like when we want to, when we're in our relationships and we're being faced with all the challenges there, like, why not? Why not write down the truest, most beautiful marriage I can imagine and write a story about it right now? Like, I think this is an interesting time to actually allow ourselves to imagine what the after could look like if we honored our longing.
And what does one do if the story and the reality don't match?
One decides whether one is going to be insanely brave with one's wild and precious life. Right?
Good old Mary Oliver.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. I mean, I have been there as well, and that's I often wonder, if I were in this situation under different life circumstances, what that might be like, when it took me a long time to be honest with myself, through my 20s and 30s. And now I feel like finally at 47, I'm like, oh, I'm just going to accept exactly who I am. And that's so much easier. Feels so much better.
God, yes. I mean, I think for our 20s and 30s, we get scared to say the thing, to say the thing we need or say the thing we want, because we're like, oh, there'll be a price to pay for it.
Yeah.
Right? That's why people are afraid. There's a price to pay for it. I'm going to make other people uncomfortable. I'm going to rock the boat. And then when we get to 40s, we realize there's the price to pay either way.
Yeah.
Right? The price to pay when you don't say it is that you slowly die inside and you're uncomfortable for the rest of your life.
And it's just unacceptable. We just cannot do that. We cannot do that to ourselves and the people we love.
That's right. That's right. Craig says that too. I mean, I really believe in the idea of that there's no such thing as one-way liberation, right? Like when we go for what is true and beautiful for ourselves, it is always inevitably what is true and beautiful for our children and for our ex and for whoever else, right? Because
even if it feels terrible at the time.
Terrible.
You write about that so beautifully in Untamed, the fear around dismantling your family and what that meant to you at the time. And it's almost like if you could tell that family unit what you know now, but you can't. You just have to traverse through it. And then you come out the other side. And it's true that everybody ends up, I believe, as long as you're honest and in integrity to the best of your ability, your kids are always going to win.
Yeah. And regardless of everything's easy or better one way or another, at least they win because they saw a model of how to live with courage and integrity and like true to yourself. I mean, I'll never forget, I almost didn't follow my heart. I almost did not. I almost just abandoned myself again after I met Abby. I just was like, yes, I had admitted to myself that I was in love for the first time in my life. But I just decided, Gwyneth, that I couldn't do anything about it because, well, for so many freaking reasons, but the biggest one being I was trained to believe that a good mother does not break her children's hearts. Right?
Same. I got that too.
Yeah. And then I remember one day I was braiding Tish's hair and I just thought this thought. I thought, I'm staying in this marriage for this little girl. But would I want this marriage for this little girl?
Right.
And if I wouldn't want it for her, then why am I modeling bad love and calling it good mothering? Right?
That's it. That's perfect.
And the reason is because we get this memo that's like, a good mother is a martyr. Right? What a good mother does is she just buries herself, her emotions, her dreams, her needs for forever, and she calls that love. Right? Which is the worst legacy we could pass down ever. It's like literally passing a death sentence to our children. It's like, when we live with these, when we do not examine our beliefs about things, whoa, we are just like on autopilot and we are passing down shitty memos to our kids. Because if we teach our kids that the ultimate love is martyrdom, then that's what they'll try to live up to their whole lives.
I know.
Right? So, and that's Carl Jung's quote about the biggest burden that a child can bear is the unlived life of a parent. Even if the family situation isn't perfect later. The reason for that is that no family situation is perfect. But at least they got a model for living. Like what I figured out is a good mother to me is not a martyr. A good mother is a model, right? Like our children will only allow themselves to live as boldly as we allow ourselves to live. So really, to me, what good motherhood is about is just never settling for anything, for any relationship or community or nation that's less beautiful than the one we would want our children to have.
Yeah, because all they know is what we model. They're on our Wi-Fi. They're connected to the mother's Wi-Fi. We can say one thing, they feel the other.
That's
I
right.
mean, isn't there something to, just going back to what you were saying about the unlived life of the parent, but isn't there something in the Bible about the sins of the father that become the sins of the son? Like, isn't that what that means in a way? It's like whatever's unlived and unprocessed in the parent.
Yeah, and I think that all I know is that it feels like every parenting generation gets some kind of memo, right? And one that women have gotten forever is just disappear. Right?
Yes.
And the really cool pattern, if you want to start thinking about it, is that if you examine the message we've gotten in every arena, like how to be a good girl, how to be a good partner, a good wife, a good person of faith, they all in one way or another say disappear, right? Just different versions of it.
God damn it. That's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
Shit.
Yeah, in business, in all of it. Just don't get too big. Just don't. I'm sure that you've never experienced that. But when I started doing my own inner research for this book, because I figured out that I was living by these old ways of being, I really did, as I examined one at a time how I was trained to be good, all of them in one way or another said, keep getting smaller and smaller to make the world more comfortable.
But what's so difficult is finding the courage to put that down. Because all of that imprinting is so strong. You know, like you're supposed to be like that. You're not supposed to feel like this. You're supposed to be a martyr, whatever the case may be. I think it's really, really hard to, and I think it's at different times in different women's lives and catalyzed by different things, but it's and some people never do, but it's really hard to, harness that moment and be like, okay, forget it. From now on, I'm going to, as you say in Untamed, live to not disappoint myself above anybody else. Like that is such a hard thing to get to.
Yeah.
And it's also just a decision that you have to make, right?
Well, yeah, and you have to make it, first of all, I don't think it's like a before and after. Like right. Every day I do at least 16 things just to please everyone else. Okay. So it's not like, I'm freaking untamed all day. Okay. Still working on it every day. But I think one of the ways that it makes it a little bit easier is to count the cost of it, right? There's like, if you're going to start being bolder, being whatever, if you're going to defy your particular culture or family's expectations of you, you have to be prepared for the inevitable backlash. I think one of the challenges that happens is we think if I step outside the cage, if I step outside of the box, like the angels will rejoice. That's not what happens. Like there's a price to pay, as you say. Like the second you behave, according to your inner self instead of the outer culture's expectations for you, you will hear about it, right? And it's traumatic.
Oh yeah, you'll hear about it from family. In my case, from national news outlets.
Yeah, some of us have different challenges. Okay. Yeah. So I'm not totally sure about that one, but I will tell you that, I'll tell you that I announced that I was divorcing my husband and marrying a female Olympian while I was on a nationwide church tour.
I remember.
So ain't nobody mean, like people being mean for Jesus.
Glennon,
that was hard.
You're but so right.
I know.
They're so right.
They're so right. They're so completely right all the days. Okay? But even with all of that, even like coming out on Christian, the scariest thing for me was telling my mom.
Yes.
Like,
of course.
And it makes me feel for everybody, because it's like you can think you are such an untamed badass until you have to call your mom. Like, And then all of those imprints, all of those
Yes. Yes.
7 years old again, just,
Yes.
oh my God. And then it's like so hard because it's easy, I have found. It's not like the rage from people who hate me, that shakes me. It's the quiet concern of people who love me.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
That is the hardest thing, right? Because it's so much, you can reject this one, but you can't.
Yeah.
So I
also
really
think
believe.
too, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go, I want to hear.
No, it just reminded me, one of my teachers along the way said that, if, if somebody says something and it hurts you, um, then it's just a sign that it's a judgment you're already holding against yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if a stranger has an opinion, it's like, well, I'm not holding that judgment. But if your mom or someone close to you, it's like you are imprinted with their opinion of you. And so you are therefore, by definition, holding that judgment against yourself already. And then it hurts so much.
It hurts. And it scares you. And especially when you're somebody who, I love my mom. We are like so codependent. Like it's just, and I think that throughout the whole Untamed journey, all this stuff with activism, with church, with all the things, the moment with my mom is when I became an actual adult. Yeah. Because when I told her about leaving Craig and marrying Abby, she was so afraid. And I could feel her fear in every conversation, just all the questions and what will the world say and what will the kids do and what will just like worrying and calling that love, And I remember one day I was under a tree on the phone at a soccer game, and I heard her say, "I'm going to come visit you. Your dad and I are coming to visit." And I just heard myself saying, "No, you can't come. Like you are afraid."
Yeah.
And you can't bring that fear to us because our children are not afraid. Right? We taught them that love is to be celebrated and that it is best to just be yourself and let the world catch up. So they're not carrying the fear you carry, but if you bring it here, they will see it in your eyes and they will help you carry it because they love and trust you.
Yeah.
So I have to tell you this hard thing, which is that my fear is not your problem, right? You need to go and deal with your problem. And when you can come to this island of our family with nothing but celebration and respect and love, we will lower the drawbridge for you, but not 1 second sooner, right? And that's the hardest one to break. Like I figured out that and that day, like, oh, a woman, you become a responsible woman when you become a disobedient daughter, right? Because we are building things, that Khalil Gibran poem that I love so much on children, like our children are not our children. They are life's yearning for itself, right? They are of the future and we cannot go there even in our dreams. So if we are not doing something that our parents don't understand, we're not doing life right.
For sure.
Which is tragic because that means our kids are not doing things. They're going to be doing things we don't understand. We're going to have to let them.
Can we talk about that after quarantine? That's just the bridge too far.
No, now it's just straight up control and quarantine. And TV all damn day. All day.
And video games. Don't forget those.
Whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes.
My expectations are very low.
Yeah, mine too. One thing that I did want to ask you about was you seem to have, I don't know, such a good way to contextualize how the world has a hard time with women who are disappointing them because they decide like, this is who I want to be. And I want to be multiple incarnations of what it is to be a woman at once, or I want to change careers, or I want to divorce my husband and marry a woman, or whatever the case may be. Why do you think that women are so often the first, chorus to say like, oh, she shouldn't do that, like the judging? Mm-hmm. It always makes me so sad.
Well, first of all, I think and I've been thinking about this a lot lately with the little ones, because I've been thinking about how kids learn all of this stuff, that the taming. And I do believe that if girls were allowed to be as direct with each other as boys are young, that all of this stuff wouldn't have to come out backward, sideways.
Right.
Right? Like, for example, every time somebody says to me, "Oh, I'm a girl," I'm a guy's girl, because girls are all backstabby and catty and all that. Well, that's because we're not allowed to stab anyone in the face, right? Like we could just stab people up front. We wouldn't have to constantly be like, "Oh, girls gossip." That's because we're not allowed to say anything directly. Because
Right.
we have to be sweet and we have to be whatever. So I don't think it's a fair assessment to say women do this way. I think that women are not allowed to communicate directly, so we learn backwards, sideways of doing it, right? I also truly believe that, I mean, okay, this is what happened to me. Oh, I put this in Untamed. Okay. I have probably every other speaking event, somebody raises their hand and says to me, "I used to relate to you so much. I used to love all of your writing when you used to just talk about being sad and depressed all the time." Right? Basically, like when you hated your life, you were awesome. But now that you're happy and you're with Abby and you're whatever, I'm just finding it harder and harder to relate to you. Okay, this is a constant chorus. Hard to relate to you. And that is because that's just like a very clear thing that we can study in every social study that's ever been done. Like the more successful and bold and confident and joyful a man becomes, the more people like and trust him. And the more successful and bold and confident a woman becomes, her ability just plummets. Everyone hates her, right? And the thing is that nobody knows why they hate her. So they just say things like, "I just can't put my finger on it. I don't know. I can't put my finger on it. I just don't like her. Just something about her. Something about her." So I can put my finger on it, right? Everybody can put their finger on it. It's internalized misogyny, right? We see a woman who is stepping out of all of the cultural cages that we feel we are in. Subconsciously, we feel them around us. We feel the bars. We are in the cage. We see a woman who has found her way out of the cage, and it crushes us, right?
Yeah.
I have huge empathy for it, actually, because I've experienced it in my life. When I was drinking all the time, just such a drunk, like I just was almost dead when I got sober. If somebody handed me a book that was written by a woman, I could not read it.
Oh, wow.
Hated women writers. Like I couldn't look at them. I just felt like looking right at the sun, right? I couldn't do it. And that was, I think there's just nothing more painful than seeing somebody doing something that you know a braver, bolder, freer version of yourself was meant to do, right? So I think that we hate women who are free and bold because, number one, they're irking our conditioning, right? It's a dissonance. It's like, no, we are not allowed to do that. We aren't allowed to do that. We want to put her back in her cage. And two, it just hurts like hell. Because some of us have bars that other people don't have. Some of us start in places that it is much harder to get free from than other people. It's very complicated, right? And it's just, there's a little bit of heartbreak in it. And I'm telling you that I have it. I was at a soccer game last year, and all of the soccer moms on the sidelines were getting all pissed off at this girl on the other team. And so I was watching this girl, and she was just like, had this swagger about her. And she was just like so freaking good at the soccer. And it looked like she wasn't even trying. It's just like, go, and just like no sweating, just like walking back to the thing. And I was like, this bitch. Okay, she's 12. I'm 44. I'm a mother on the sidelines who teaches people.
I can't.
Okay? Who preaches sisterhood and feminism. So now I caught myself. Okay, so I think what I'm saying is, what I have learned is that I have that knee-jerk reaction just like everybody else. But what I have learned is not to trust the knee-jerk reaction, right? Like, I think the knee-jerk reaction is our conditioning. It's never our truest self. And when we can stop and question that knee-jerk reaction, like the who does she think she is reaction, it is possible to move from a place of bitterness to a place of admiration. Because I sometimes feel like jealousy is just like admiration that's holding its breath really tight.
I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree with you. It's funny too. It's like I, as a woman who nothing makes me feel happier or more fulfilled than connecting to the brilliance and power and boldness of other women. And, it makes me feel like I have all those things for myself, even if I don't. But when I was young, I don't know. I think because of the imprinting that we're talking about, I just was scared of it. I didn't know what to do with that. And it's been one of my life's greatest gifts to, I don't know, dismantle all that and just get close to the essence of what it is to be that kind of woman. And that's why I loved your book so much. And so did everybody else. Miss New York Times, #1.
It's so weird to be stuck in your house. Every once in a while somebody calls and it's like, the book's doing great. I'm like, great.
It's so wonderful because I don't know. It's so, I think it's so heartening that a book like that would be so successful and so commercial.
Yeah, that feels good. And also, my secret hope is that during this cocoon quarantine, that everyone's allowing themselves to just break down and they're reading this book. So I kind of feel like everyone could come out completely badass.
I agree with you. Hold on one second. What did you say, honey? Oh, okay.
I love you.
I love you too. Have fun.
See? I would never have seen that if we weren't in quarantine.
That's true. He's so cute.
How old is he? You said he's 14?
40. Oh no, that was my son. I mean, that was my husband.
I was like, 40?
That was Freud, actually. That's who that was.
Got it.
Sorry.
It's confusing during quarantine. Husbands are acting like sons. So yeah, it's long.
Sorry, that was my husband who's 48. Did he just turn 48 or 49? Something like that.
Yeah.
But we're newlyweds too.
Thank God for the newlywed phase during quarantine. It's helpful.
I know, thank God. I've been talking to some of my other girlfriends who, well, did you see what happened to the divorce rate in China when yeah, they sort of, loosened the quarantines and divorced tens of thousands of people. Oh my God.
Look, I'm just going to choose to see that in a positive light. That people sat with their hot loneliness. They honored their discontent. They said the jig is up and we're not pretending anymore. Let's get the hell out.
Let's just end this right now.
Yeah.
Okay, I know I'm almost at time, so I'm just going to think about, oh my God, I have so many other things I want to ask you about, but I guess I would love, I think that what might be most helpful is to understand a little bit about how you went from the framework of religion to finding that within yourself.
I mean, looking back on that process right now, I would say that I still believe that the divine, the higher power, God, can be found in a church, inside of religion. However, I truly believe that it can be the hardest place to find it. One example being, I was from my roots are in fundamentalist Christianity. And one of the tenets of fundamentalist Christianity is that you cannot trust yourself, right? And that's taught to us in a lot of different ways, but with actual scripture that's hammered home with us, like, your heart is wicked. Do not lean on your own understanding. So the first story I ever learned about being a girl was like, okay, so the earth was made and everything was awesome when it was just the two bros, Adam and God, but then Eve shows up and then she can't leave well enough alone. She can't be grateful. She wants more. She gets curious. She goes for it. And then all hell is breaks loose on the earth forever, right? So the lesson was very clear, like, do not want more. It's completely outside of alignment with my understanding of faith, right? Which is that there's no part of me anymore that believes what I was taught inside of religion, which was that I am bad, that people are bad and dangerous and can't be trusted, right? I do not believe that anymore. That there's this idea of God out here. You are bad, so you're supposed to surrender to this will of God out here. That model doesn't work for me. I believe completely that my deepest, truest self is good, right? And that everyone's deepest, truest self is good and can be trusted. And in fact, that deepest, truest self is God, right? Which is why I think, the scripture where Jesus said, I and the Father are one. I and the Father are one. I think all of that means is my truest, deepest self is God, and so is yours, and so is yours, and so is everyone's. And I think it's super dangerous inside of religion to cut people off from their intuition, from God inside them. It's brilliant, right? Because that is how you control people. I mean, the amount of times I went to ministers and said, I don't understand this. Why are you preaching constantly like against abortion and gays when Jesus never mentioned either? Like, I'd sit down with ministers and have these conversations, Gwyneth, and they would always say to me, you seem like a smart woman, but the heart is wicked. Don't rely on your own understanding. So if you can never trust the messages, don't trust yourself. Don't trust yourself. Don't trust yourself. And it does such damage. My wife, Abby, grew up in the Catholic Church, and she was taught. She remembers being a little gay kid and being in those pews, and just knowing she was gay, and hearing over and over again that who she was an abomination, was a sin, was against God, and she has spent her entire life feeling completely separate from God, feeling like God is against her, that she, and I, one of the best moments of our entire relationship actually was, I was speaking in a church, and she comes to most of my events, but always the church ones, and she hates church, okay? But she loves watching me on an altar talking about God, using the word she, cussing in a church. It just makes her so happy, right? So we were about to go out, and this lovely minister said something that was really cool and sweet. And Abby said, I don't like it in churches. And she said, when I was little, I had to choose between God and the church and myself. And I chose myself. And later I said, honey, I think that what I believe in my heart is that they did give you a shitty false choice when you were little, right? But what you did was you chose yourself and God instead of church, right? When you walked away from religion, you did it to protect God in you, right? No church owns God. No religion owns God, right? The divine is inside of us. It's between us. It's everywhere. So, I don't know, Gwyneth, all I know is that I will never again outsource my faith, right? I won't outsource anything. I think all of it can be dangerous. I went to a therapist who I loved for years and years, and who told me that the best way to deal with the fact that sex with my husband made me want to die inside was to just try blowjobs, because those are less intimate. Like, that advice, I was like, okay, I guess I'll just try. Like, it took me a full day to be like, what the? Like, no.
Wow.
That's the danger of, we can ask everybody. We can gather advice. We can have sage teachers. We can have ministers. We can have authors. But we have to know at the end of the day that nobody knows what we should do.
That's
right?
right.
That like nobody else knows what we should do because nobody else has lived the life that we are living. Like we can't ask other people to give us directions to places we've never been. They've never been. And so that's what faith to me is now. It's not like an allegiance to a bunch of rules that a bunch of men decided, eons ago to keep control and power. Like that has nothing to do with faith. That's something else. That's institutional control. Faith to me is never abandoning that deepest, truest self, right? It's just integrity, living the same on the outside as I am on the inside. Like my two selves are integrated.
And what an amazing opportunity we can find in the stationariness of where we are now.
That's I have tattooed on my wrist, and I got this when I was getting sober. It says, be still. Like the only advice I ever have for anyone is just be still. Like, we all know. Every time one of my friends says, I don't know what to do, I always say, yes, you do. You just don't want to do the thing that you know to do because it's hard. Right? We all know what to do. So maybe that's a gift that this time allows us, just the forced stillness that returns us to ourselves.
This has been so great.
I loved every minute of it.
You are so incredible. Thank you so much.
Thank you for everything you do. Thank you for showing up in the world as you do. Thank you for not being in any cage. Thank you for dealing with people who don't get it and inspiring us all.
Thank you so much, Glennon. What a pleasure and an honor.
Love you. Give your family hugs for me.
I will. Likewise.
Okay. Bye, love.
Bye.